Welcome to today's FS Club webinar, the EU AI Act, the State of Play. I'm Zoe Buckingham, an international marketing consultant with a particular interest in technology. So, welcome everybody today. I'd like to, just before we move on, thank our very generous sponsors who have been wonderful at allowing us to cover so many broad topics. So thank you to all of you. Now, just some housekeeping notes before we go any further. The slides will be available to download in the chat and on the website, and we will be holding a 20-minute Q&A session after our speaker's presentation. So please use the chat facility and send your questions to me. I will then feed them into the conversation. In actual fact, our speaker has also asked that not only do you send through questions, but you also send through your thoughts at the end of the presentation. So based on what you knew before, how you feel afterwards about the topic. So perhaps if I could suggest that you put your questions in the questions box and your thoughts in the chat box, and we'll try to rifle through both towards the end of the presentation and come back to you on that. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to chair this event today and to welcome Nicolas Moës, Director for European AI Governance at the Future Society. Nicolas is an economist focused on the impact of artificial intelligence on geopolitics, the economy and industry. He's the Director for European AI Governance at the Future Society, where he studies and monitors European developments in the legislative framework surrounding AI. Nicolas is a native French speaker, bonjour, who is fluent in English and persists in learning Dutch and Mandarin. Well, full marks to you, Nicolas, for trying. So without further ado, Nicolas, the floor is yours, and I believe we're starting with a poll.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Zoe. Very nice to be here. I am really excited to have this opportunity to talk with all of you and to hear a bit more also everyone else's perspective on these questions. And actually, to kickstart this, indeed, there is a poll that you see here, right? Where, quite frankly, let's say in preparation for the Q&A, I'd be curious to see what you think, what you have heard about the AI Act so far, to the extent to which you know about it. So yeah, I see the quick poll is ongoing, right, Zoe?
It is indeed. So I've not heard about this AI Act before. I've heard a bit about it. I know it's rough content, or I've heard about it, and I'm actively following it, and I'm quite knowledgeable. Interesting results. So we've got quite a few people who want to know a lot more about the AI Act.
Indeed. So that's very interesting that there are a few that have that are actively following the debate, and yeah, 60% who are not following the debate, and even 30% among them who have not heard about the AI Act before. So yeah, interesting results. That's good. And then yeah, as Zoe mentioned, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts afterwards, also simply sharing your view. My question for you is, what do you think, if to the extent that you have heard about the AI Act, what do you think of it? What are your concerns about it? What are your hopes about it? And yeah, if you feel confident enough to make suggestions about how to make it better, that's also something that I would be very curious to hear. So thank you very much. With that said, let me share my screen. There we go. I'm gonna quickly then for the people who have not been following the debate very actively. So it seems over roughly 3/4 of the people might benefit from this presentation. For the others, sorry if this is repeating what you know already. But I will try to keep it brief, but also want to welcome questions from anyone, clarification question and that kind of thing, after the presentation as well, if that's all right with you. I'll be able to go to each slide afterwards. So the EU AI Act, one of the key features for it is that it's based itself on a risk-based approach, as they call it, which is embodied by these pyramids that have various levels, and each level has a different level of risk. And also it's a pyramid because like the top levels, the riskiest one, have very few use cases that are considered like at that level of risk. So the 4 level of risk are listed here, right? And so there are 5 prohibited AI practices. There is like maybe like 55 or something like that standalone, like high risk, so-called high risk issues. Then there is like a broader range of systems that need transparency, but that are not otherwise like constrained by the AI Act. And then like there are all the other AI systems which have no constraints. So like it's really important to see that like the various levels correspond to various level of obligations as well. So for prohibited AI practices, well, it's in the name. It's simply like it cannot be placed on the market. Then for the high risk AI system, this is really like the core of the legislation has been designed for high risk AI systems. You have a broad range of requirements and obligations that come up. And then like for AI systems that are lower risk, like there is like for some of them, if they interact with users, they need to flag basically that there is like an AI systems that is being interacting with the human consumer, let's say, of the AI service. And then like for all the other AI systems, there is just like an encouragement to be responsible and to develop code of conduct. So as I mentioned, the high risk AI systems are the core issue of the AI Act, right? And so there is like kind of various way. This is like perhaps a bit too much into the nitty-gritty, but like for you to get a sense of what we are talking about here, right? It's like there are requirements on the system itself, so on the AI system itself, and there are obligations on the provider of the high-risk AI system. So in terms of obligation, we need like the quality management, tech documentation. We need to deal with the logs, right? So there's automatic logging features that some AI system have, and then like registering the system, undergoing conformity assessment, etc. But in terms of like requirements, this is where like it becomes very technical, right? It's really about like developing some data and data governance practices, having like a system of human oversights for the system, for the AI product itself. And then like, yeah, ensuring accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity of the system. So these are all requirements that have been in the initial proposal of the AI Act, right? However, it has been now over a year, so it's been a year and a half actually that co-legislators have been discussing, and there are many other ideas that have been put forward, right? So one of the ideas that is not appearing here, but like one of the ideas among perhaps like 100 different ideas, right? So that's why I'm not trying to list them all here, but like, so to get you a sense of like, for example, environmental impact assessment, or like notions of compute monitoring and that kind of thing, accounting for compute. These are other ideas that like legislators are currently like tossing around to see what is politically feasible and what is beneficial for the objective of the AI Act. So before we continue, like there is like it's important to understand that the AI Act is one of many digital policies, right? And each of these digital policies have their own objectives. So you might be familiar with GDPR, which is for better or worse extremely well known in the entire world now. The Digital Service Act, the Digital Market Act. We have, of course, like the Data Act and the Data Governance Act, which is that also has a lot of overlap with what the AI Act itself was planning to do, right? Because if you see in the previous slide, like one of the requirements is data and data governance. And somehow there is like 2 different acts that are also tackling 2 different like piece of legislations that intend to affect like the way we govern data. This is in addition to private data, like so like general data protection regulation, which also is about data, right? So as you might know, there is a whole constellation, and like here, for example, the general product safety regulation is very important as well for AI, and they are currently updating it. So by they, I mean the European Commission and the legislators, the EU policymakers. And then there is the product liability, the product liability directive that is also being updated. And that is, it's been a couple of years now that there's been like collections of feedback about what to do with the liability in a digital world, right, where a lot of these systems are opaque. So all of these have, like the 6 that are listed here, have, this is like the 6 main ones, but they are, of course, like, for example, for industrial robotics, there is also the machinery directive for medical devices that use AI, while there is also the medical device regulation. There are a lot of different files involved. And so what distinguishes the AI Act really is this, of course, like this focus on AI systems, rather than on the data, or rather than on the I don't know, the market practices of some of the providers of AI systems. And well, its objective is fairly clear, right? The objective of the AI Act is really like to kind of unify the single market, the digital single markets, in the way like the AI products, AI systems, as they call it. AI systems, which, by the way, also include AI services, right? If you know AI as a service, this is very much like these business models would also be covered by the AI Act. But so like the intention there is to ensure that like this innovation is fostered in the EU, but that also like the consumers, like all these AI systems respect the fundamental rights of citizens, of EU citizens, and the safety and the health of the consumer is protected. So it is a very broad kind of type of set of objectives for the EU AI Act, because it covers consumer protection, some innovative measures, and kind of industrial policy measure, and also the questions of like simply respect of fundamental rights, which is in the digital age, it's like a fundamental discussion that like the society needs to have, right? So it's an important piece of legislation, and it's one that has been very controversial because there is so much potential for each of that, right? So the objective here is really to have like one act to kind of like tackle once and for all question, like quote unquote once and for all the AI system. So they are also hoping that this will be future proof. Let me try to, there we go. Of course, to enforce all of this, and this is something that is quite common in EU legislation, is to have like fines and penalties, right? So the AI Act is a regulation, so it's not a directive. It's not a communication. It's really something that is meant to be implemented like identically in all member states, and therefore like they also provide a kind of a schedule of fines in case you are like someone is violating the requirements or infringing that regulation. These requirements can go like 6%, up to 6% of the yearly turnover. There is of course some debate. There's a lot of debate actually about whether like 6% is too high or too low, given that like currently it seems from the DSA, from the DMA, but also from past GDPR infringement, when we see market capitalization of big tech companies that are found guilty of infringing some of the regulation, it seems like these fines are being considered as like just a compliance cost nowadays. So there is a bit of a debate about these fines not being deterring at all for the behavior of the AI companies, the provider of AI systems. So let me try again to switch my slide. There we go. So instead of the state of play, right? And this is something that you know, like this is an ever-evolving thing. So I am following the debate. I am meeting with a lot of the policymakers around this debate to advise them and to provide the latest research that the Future Society does, right? At this stage, like a lot of the nitty-gritty of the AI Act will be decided by standard setting organizations. So some of you might be familiar with Sensenelec and ETSI. I mean, the equivalent in the UK would be the BSI, right? And these standard setting organizations have a mandate from the European Commission to develop kind of like the actionable guidance, the operationalization of the requirements of the EU AI Act, right? So for example, in the EU AI Act, when we talk about a risk management system, like the legislation itself will be saying provider of high risk AI systems shall have a risk management system that is appropriate. There are like a couple of bullet points describing what the risk management system should do, but it's then the standard setting organizations that will have to develop a standard, like the industry, the standard industry practice for how to develop a risk management system, and building upon decades of expertise in developing this standard system, in developing these standards like for other industries, right? So there is a general risk management system standard, which is the ISO 31000, which is something that is very influential across the industry, because it is something that is not specific to a product. It's about managing risk in business in general, let's say. And so very likely, like the European Commission, as they were drafting the EU AI Act, and the current policymaker as well, right? Like as they are kind of amending this AI Act and making proposals for how to improve it, they will rely on standard setting organizations for operationalizing these requirements. So that's an important player. This is due to the way the EU does its legislation. It's like it relies a lot on expert input, and these standard setting organizations are gathering experts, generally from industry, but also from academia, to develop these standards. So one of the key players, like to bear in mind, is is that this standard setting organization, they have currently received the request from the Commission, and by the end of 2024 they will have to have developed these standards, right? So, and for those of you who might know about standard setting, this is basically they have literally like just now under 2 years, because the deadline is like the 31st of October 2024. They have just under 2 years to develop like the standards, or to develop elements of the standards, and this is very short amount of time. But yeah, so that's the state of play on the standard setting side of things. The Council of the EU is one of the two main co-legislators. So for those of you who are not familiar with the way EU makes policy, the European Commission puts forward like a proposal for a regulation, and then the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament, each of them have to develop their opinion about it, their opinion, which becomes their kind of starting negotiation, starting position in the negotiation. And so they are currently, these two of them are currently developing what we call the compromise texts. So there would be a council compromise text, which is the agreement among the 27 member states of what the EU AI Act should look like based on the proposal made by the Commission. And on the Parliament side, like they're also developing a compromise text, which is based on the compromise across like political families, right? So the socialists, the conservatives, the liberals, the Greens, the right wing, left wing. This is based then much more on the citizens kind of. They are meant to represent the citizens' perspective on these matters, while the Council is meant to represent the geopolitics, like the geopolitical agreement that is to be made. So yeah, the Council of the EU, one of these two co-legislators, then it is actually very much about to finish its compromise text. So I had a couple of meetings over the past 2 days where like the diplomats in charge of like negotiating this compromise text are quite satisfied and happy, because it's been like, it took them like 1.5 years, but now they have it. They have a compromise text that they feel they're gonna vote on it in a month, but like it's basically now just like finalizing a bit of the legalese involved with it. So there is like good progress there, and like the vote is very likely to turn out to be a yes, right? So the member states will agree amongst themselves that this is the compromise text. Then the European Parliament has actually been delayed for like, I don't know, I would say 6 to 9 months, because they did not within the European Parliament, like the MEPs were basically fighting over who should be in charge of this file. Which member of the European Parliament, members of European Parliament should be in charge of these files. So this took them like 6 to 9 months, and yeah, so that kind of delayed them a bit, but still they intend to finish their compromise text in the first half of 2023, which is like, you know, it could be like as early as February 2023, right, that they would have compromised. Once you have these two compromise texts, you actually have the trilogue phase, which is the way the Council and the European Parliament come together in a room kind of moderated by the European Commission in order to like kind of reconcile the two positions. So the two compromise texts are put in parallel, and they are then being kind of reconciled to see what makes sense to keep from one of them. And of course, this is like very politicized, right? Because this is generally like a bit of it all of a sudden becomes like, yeah, the Parliament versus the Council, which is a bit of an issue. So on both compromise texts, there's been a lot of like issues that remain open. The Council has not really provided definitive solutions, right? So they put a compromise text where they don't have strong opinions about what should be the I don't know, the high risk categorization on the right. So they tend to agree with the Commission on this thing, and therefore they have not developed a separate approach to it. But like the European Parliament, which is still discussing like a lot of issues, remain really like controversial and under experiment. Like I'm listing here the definition of AI system, the general purpose AI systems, like which is this notion of AI systems that are reused by many other AI systems, by hundreds or even thousands of AI systems, and like how to govern this generally like very complex pieces of software trained on data sets that are equally complex. And then like there is the question of like categorization for high risk, because one of the, of course, by making a risk-based approach to these issues, it is often the case that like people will ask, okay, why this is considered high risk versus while this is considered low risk, right? So this is like one of the most controversial decisions that the Commission took by putting forward a categorization mechanism that was very unclear. It was basically stating like on a case-by-case basis, like each use case will have to be assessed on whether it is high risk or not. And of course, this became like lobbyists, lobbyists in the digital sphere, like most important thing, because if you are considered high risk, all of a sudden you have all the compliance cost. While if you manage to make yourself considered low risk, if you make your whole sector or like the whole use case in your sector considered low risk, you basically are not worried at all about the AI Act.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to highlight the fact that we're nearly out of time for your presentation. It's fascinating, but if you could just whiz through the last slides.
Exactly. Yeah, I have just one last slide. But just like in terms of timeline, we are expecting this co-legislative, so the end of the trilogue, to be at some point between end of 2023 and the end of 2024, right? This is something where people seem to agree on that, and then there is a 2 years grace period before, like, you know, between the agreements, at the legislative agreement, and the entry, and the application of the AI Act. So just flagging, like, it might not be clear, like, to you, why does it matter? Well, one of the quick situations that we can have here is that, you know, if imagine that you are, you know, as you do every day, right? Like you are leading your business or your department or your team, your organization, and like you have been successful at digitalization, but like you are now kickstarting the AI transition, and all of a sudden, you know, you fail some of the aspects that are that leads to a lot of like public outcry, right? So something about like discrimination when you do job interviews, or something when your data practices were not set right. Well, you know, it's like currently this is a lot of like PR concern, right? It's about like, okay, we don't want to do that because it affects the brand, but now it actually will become a lot more about legal and compliance concern for this thing, right? And of course, like as a business, this matters a lot, and that's why there is so much lobbying around the AI Act. But of course, like the reverse is there, right? Like as a business, or as an individual, actually, there are many situations where you end up, without even knowing it, being the victim of like AI systems that are misaligned, that are dysfunctional, AI systems that are basically, you know, evolving in a gray area of the legislation, and like that therefore results in some businesses being treated unfairly, or some citizens being treated unfairly even without the intention, like even without the counterpart's intention for that. And so like with the stringency, like the AI Act would actually help gain some trust in the market. So yeah, that is about it for me in terms of like what I say to you. But like as I mentioned at the beginning, I would really want to hear more from you and to hear your opinions on this. Just a quick note that I work at the Future Society, as Zoe mentioned, and the Future Society's mission is to align AI through better governance. So we are really working on like developing some mechanisms that are cost effective, that do not like impede innovation, and that are actually effective at improving the situation, let's say, on the market, because that's true that there is a lot of hype, there is a lot of abuse, and at the same time, this is a technology that can have so much benefits for if only everyone was much more trusting of that technology. So yeah, here are my contact details, and like I'd be happy to, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. Zoe, I guess I can just pass this on to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks. That was really interesting and very educational for all of us learning about this incredibly important legislation that's emerging. And Nicolas, there've been so many questions from the floor, so that's why we wanted to get through to that. So Andrea Thiel was asking, how do you see the consequences on industry of this act? So won't the rules that are very strict block usage and internal education on sandbox use cases? I'm not quite sure, Andreas, what you mean by that, but I guess there's just concern about the restrictions and what they might do to innovation.
I see. Yeah, no, the sandbox mentioned is a concept of like regulatory sandbox, which has existed actually in the UK. There's been like the Financial Authority and the energy. I think the Energy Authority has also been like pioneering the use of sandboxes for regulatory sandboxes. So here, perhaps also like and let us know, Andrea, if I misunderstood the question, right? Like here, the impact on industry will be quite thorough. We are really in an area that has not been regulated at all. That has not really, I mean, for the past, first of all, it's a very young area. It used to be really more of a field of research, and now this is the first time that there is like a market open for it, like since 2012, let's say. And since 2012, like we have seen a dramatic growth in the hype around AI, but also the fundamentals of the market are good, right? There is a lot more revenue and this kind of thing. So here, for the first time, you have a legislation that will actually force all of these companies to all of a sudden, even develop a legal department, develop a compliance, even like simply follow standards, technical standards, right? This is something that like I expect a lot of disruption in the industry. Only the best, the most agile at adapting themselves will probably kind of like manage to recapture this new market. So we used to have a market for like AI, like whatever the quality of AI, and now like this regulation kind of forces kind of like everyone to do high quality AI, which will disrupt a lot of the industry players, for sure. And this disruption will probably like look like creation of new startups that specialize into the explainable AI, or like into the accuracy and robustness testing for AI system, because this is one of the requirements. But also adjustments like the same way we have seen like digitalization being adopted, we're now gonna have like an additional layer upon upon the automation aspect, and that will be a layer that is more about the trustworthiness of it. So yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds as if there's going to require a lot more specialization, which we saw, of course, around data with GDPR. And Nicolas, another question from Hugh Purser. Could you give us more examples of the companies or the uses of technology that might fall into those high risk groups?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the high risk is critical infrastructure. So AI system that is used for the management of critical infrastructure in many ways. Education, so AI systems that are used to assess students, or whose decision directly affect students curricula or that kind of thing, days will be considered high risk as well because of the lifetime impact. Oh, sorry, by the way, I'd say days will be considered high risk. There is, as I flagged, right, there is a lot of debate, and actually education is something that currently as like people seems to be more and more saying that this shouldn't be considered high risk. And critical infrastructure is now like expanding to also mean like communication, like, you know, even kind of like end user communication. So this is the very fluid, but like the initial proposal had like critical infrastructure. I mean, a few use cases in critical infrastructure, a few use cases in education, asylum and migration decision, law enforcement, judicial operation, access to public services. We had like also there are two more that I've been, because it has changed so much that I forgot which one were the original ones. Let me quickly get that for you. So as I mentioned, the critical infrastructure and biometric, of course, biometric identification and categorization of natural persons. So like real-time facial recognition or real-time gait recognition of real-time like emotions recognition, and all that would be considered high risk, as well as like employment and worker management. These were the two sections. So like as for education, like some employment decisions affect the lifetime of a citizen, and these decisions would be considered high risk, because if the AI system is biased, for example, it would actually over time result in systematic discrimination on the labor market and that kind of thing. So yeah, employment, management of worker, or like access to self-employment as well. So yeah, these are the 8 areas, and each of them have like some very specific some specific use cases that are considered in it. So it's not like if your industry is in education, it doesn't mean like if you are optimizing the if your AI system is optimizing the let's say the what could we call that, like the allocation of chairs in the classrooms or something like that, or the allocation of like budgets or something like that like across like a school itself. Like this is something that would be not considered high risk because it's not directly about the citizen, sorry, the student in that case, right? So
that's very important to understand. Thank you, Nicolas. Mark Mosley was asking if you could just tell us a little bit more about the Future Society and your role in this process. So is that because you're within the Future Society?
Yeah. So yeah, of course. So the Future Society itself, it's a 501c3 registered in Boston, right? And this is a network, like it's a global, I mean, transatlantic, like fully remote network of researchers, and like I have been for the past 5 years now the representative here in Brussels. I mean, representative. I do research. I started as a AI policy researcher there, and over the past 5 years, like yes, I have now I'm leading really all the European AI governance work, and this is something where like the Future Society intervenes here by providing providing not only just research like any think tank, but actually like concrete solutions. So a lot of the policymakers, for example, are curious to understand how to govern general purpose AI systems, how to enforce the AI Act, like what is the operationally, what does it look like to be in a startup that produce AI systems? Like what can the authorities actually reasonably request from these entities? And so the Future Society does a lot of applied research to provide then like recommendations to the policymakers. So that's for the European side of things. But like we operate globally, right? So we have a lot of our researchers, and myself actually, I am also in the OECD expert groups on AI, with the Global Partnership on AI, the Trade and Technology Council. We operate on all these fora where significant governance decisions are being made about AI. So every time like decision makers come together, even with industry, right? So sometimes there are some industry initiatives that reach out in order for getting some help and some like kind of independent advice about what is the best practices in something or the other. Yeah, happy to talk more about the future society. Like if you are interested, you can reach out to me, and I can give you more answers, and we can talk a bit more on that if you're interested, for sure.
Nicolas, I think it is helpful to the audience because I think it's useful to understand how this kind of legislation comes to birth and the people who influence it along the way with their various areas of expertise. And on that note, Nicholas Bailey has been asking about whether this legislation is going to put a formal definition on the term AI. I mean, working in the technology space, all sorts of things are labelled AI, which really aren't always AI. So it sounds like there's a need for that too.
They do. They have a need. They do have a need for that. It is like it will become legally way too uncertain not to define AI. So the original proposal was putting forward like the definition of an AI system is a system with human given objectives and whose decision influence its environment. Let me quickly check whether I got that right. Yeah. So it's software that is developed with one or more of the techniques and approach listed below that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, generate outputs such as content, predictions, recommendation, or decisions. And so the list of techniques that are considered AI was actually very broad. It was like all machine learning approach, logic and knowledge and knowledge based approaches, and then like quite controversially statistical approaches, which is something that statistical approaches, like a lot of the Excel macros and a lot of like multilinear regressions that you would use to do some more advanced business analytics would be actually affected, would be considered statistical approach, right? So this is something that like that definition was very, very broad. But so the justification for that is that they do a very, very broad definition, and then they have extremely narrow definition of what is actually risky and therefore what is actually in the de facto scope, right? And so like for that, this very narrow approach, like yeah, like that has led to a lot of controversy. But the overall point here is that this definition is likely to be amended 20 times over the next 12 months. I probably have seen like 25 different definitions of AI for this AI. Personally, because I was working on the definition of the OECD back in 2017 and 2018, I feel the OECD definition is better. Some people in the European Parliament in particular are very keen about the OECD definition. But yeah, this is like something that like, it's no longer about what is the true definition or what is the correct definition. It's really about a political compromise right now. And that's sometimes, as a think tank, the Future Society is always like kind of keeping in mind the ground truth and the ground like the approach that would be the best. Like, I mean, you know, standards and the OECD have converged on a definition that makes a lot of sense. And then like we see of course like big players throwing a lot of money behind lobbyists to affect the definitions in ways that don't often make sense, I must say. But yeah, and by the way, civil society as well, right? Civil society would want to have like a lot of a much broader definition. Anyway.
Very helpful, thank you, Nicolas. And Frederick McMahon has asked, do you believe some organisations using AI have lost control over their machine learning and that it's having a negative impact on EU citizens?
So it is lost control. So it's not just the AI system, right? It is also the processes around the AI systems. And when you look at this kind of, when you look at this like, this whole process, which happens to involve an AI system, yes, I do think like a lot of companies over the past 5 to 10 years have been kind of like sometimes, you know, misled by a lot of players that came in and said like, yeah, we're gonna give you some AI stuff, but like you don't need to understand how it works. It just works. It's magic, and that's contributed a lot to the hype. But now it has also like led to a lot of lack of control, but not in the sense of like the AI an AI robots or something like that doing something on its own and nobody controlling it, but like having actually like no proper human understanding of the whole like pieces of the process. right? It is something that is quite important to bear in mind, is the fact that like there is liability in the human being, so the human being would need to know what is going on, because like an AI system cannot be liable of something. It's just a tool. It's how the businesses develop it and deploy it that determine whether it's used for good or bad.
Like, can I ask? I've worked with clients who are producing what's called explainable AI.
Yeah.
So is this a potential route to a bit more clarity around AI processes?
Yeah, for sure. So the key, whatever the outcome of this legislation, one of the key takeaway, and I think one of the key benefits for society as a whole, right? Even if the AI Act becomes the most terrible legislation, or even if they simply like scrap it out altogether because they cannot agree on anything, even then we would still have like the technical standardization committees set up working on defining what are the best practices. We would have also a lot of like maybe not, there is no requirement for explainable AI, right? But there is definitely a lot of requirements for like transparency and like accuracy and robustness, which requires somehow understanding what is happening in the background. There is also a lot of requirements on simply data governance to understand better why your data set is resulting in this or that recommendation. So yeah, it will clarify a lot what explainable AI means. It will trigger a lot of research about how to operationalize aspects of explainable AI, even though we do not have there is no like article currently that says like, oh, AI should be explainable. It is more like some more fundamental aspects, such as like, yeah, transparency and accuracy and robustness.
So it can be used as a way of supporting the process of being more transparent.
Oh yeah, it is one implementation of this. And by the way, even though there is no standards being mandated about explainability as well itself, right? There is a broader standard about trustworthiness, and in trustworthiness, explainability is a key one, right? But it's also a very costly requirement to impose. So again, it becomes political about whether or not to impose that on companies.
Yeah, I can understand that. Just very briefly, as a last question, Nicolas, you've talked about some of the challenges of the European approach. Could you say, just in like 3 words, what you would say are the benefits of the European approach to legislation?
So, for sure, like I think it is extremely. It will provide a lot of legal certainty. So that's one of the things, and it will also simply like I genuinely believe that currently the versions that are circulating, even though there is disagreement, most of them add value. Most of them are really like gonna make the consumer a lot more over the long term, like startups and small businesses that have not yet deployed AI, and consumers will feel a lot more confident into purchasing AI systems, and therefore the market will grow. And this is a market of higher quality as well, because I mean we have seen this kind of thing happening with the aviation industry or the machinery industry, the industrial robotics industry. So yeah, I think like it will increase like legal certainty for sure, and I'm very confident it will increase also just the trustworthiness of the whole industry, which has been plagued by a lot of scandals in recently.
Understood, Nicolas. Thank you so much, and that's been very, very helpful. How insightful all of this was. Thank you very much, Nicolas Moës, for taking us through this critical piece of legislation. And I'd also like to thank once again our sponsors, who are from a very diverse range of businesses, as you can see, where they're not just from the financial services sector, although that's very important, of course. Thank you to all of you for listening and providing very interesting questions today. And finally, we have some exciting events coming up, and it would be great if you could attend as many of these as possible. I'm sure you will find those really fascinating too. There's more discussion on stable coins and their role in the whole kind of crypto ecosystem, Chile and its work on sustainable finance, education in times of emergency, and why employee share ownership matters. So thank you to you all. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Zoe.